This video is part of a series that discusses a few literary theories in an introductory capacity. Don't expect any nice flashy visuals, as this is pretty much a slideshow with some voiceover. This video will discuss Romanticism, and it is intended to help someone understand the basics behind this literary theory. This entire video also only makes use of one reference, the Unisa study guide for the Introduction to Theory of Literature. This video is technically meant to help students doing that module, but it should be educational to anyone who wants to learn a little about literary theory. According to the current study guide, all the information on Romanticism can be found on pages 55 to 65. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Romanticism is a theory that originated in the 1800s and had a strong influence on literary analysis and criticism well into the 20th century, and there are likely still some proponents of it as a theory. This theory is derived from the artistic movement of the same name, and there are a few romantics you've probably heard of in school, unless of course you actually like classic literature, in which case you'll definitely know them, such as Samuel Coleridge, William Wordsworth, Lord Byron, etc. The basic idea behind this artistic perspective is an appreciation for things like emotion and nature and beauty, but things change a little when you factor it into literary criticism and analysis. Now, first things first, this theory, when applied to analysis, is considered a sender-centered approach. You see, in every literary product, there are four factors at play. Four things you can focus on: the sender, the message, the receiver, or the context. If something is sender-centered, it means that we are going to focus on the creator of the literary work in question. So, if we want to analyze a poem from a romantic perspective, we would consider the life of the poet. What did the poet think and feel? Where did they live? Why did they write this particular poem, etc.? There is a strong focus on the person who made the thing in question. Now, if you're going to base a literary theory on the creator of the art, then you're going to need to back it up a bit. The typical way to view a lot of art is to put the art front and center. Is this piece of art good? But Romanticism is more interested in the person behind it. How did they create such a thing? And the answer is generally rather flattering. The artist is obviously some kind of creative genius that could create something ex nihilo. If you are unfamiliar with this expression, and why wouldn't you be, it's Latin and therefore pretentious, but ex nihilo means out of nothing. When we are discussing the traditional view of a supreme being, like the Christian God, he is said to create ex nihilo. He creates out of nothing. God does not conform to any of the laws of physics. God will just make things even if he has no components through which to do so. We, as pitiful little humans, cannot create anything out of nothing. When we want to build a house, we use building materials. When we want to make food, we use ingredients. When we write code, we need electricity and a medium through which code can be interpreted. Nothing can come out of nothing. But the Romantics believed that they could create art out of nothing. There was no external influence on them that made them write that poem about nature. They wrote on nature and created something out of nothing, as if they themselves were akin to God. This is why there is a certain belief, when adopting a romantic view of the world, that artists are like demigods. They are not mere mortals like you and I. They are gods of the page. And this is how you can understand the romantic view of artistic creation. It is intrinsically tied to the author themselves and the creativity, originality, intention, and imagination of that person. Those are some of the major elements that will help you to understand Romanticism. There must be creativity, because the godlike creator must have a drive to create things. There must be originality, because the creator is creating out of nothing. Everything they make is original. There must be intention, because for something to be made out of nothing, there has to be a reason behind it. The author must know what they are creating and why they are creating that thing. And of course, there must be imagination, because the author must be able to imagine these things that they will soon create out of nothing. Now, this presents us with a bit of an issue for other literary theorists. The Romantics, they believe that they hold all this creativity and originality and intention and imagination, and so they are the only ones who can truly understand the work they have created. You cannot really analyze a poem, because who cares what you say about the poem when the author has a contradictory interpretation? Isn't the author's interpretation the most important interpretation? Surely the author knows exactly what they created and why it is so special. It isn't like this is an incredibly arrogant way to see yourself, right? I wrote this poem and so only I know the true meaning behind it. Isn't it possible that you are wrong about your own work? Is it possible that there are things you unconsciously added to your poem, things that you didn't even realize you said? Can't a book be interpreted in an infinite number of ways? Well, the Romantic does not believe so. Who cares what you got out of my book? I'm the only person who truly understands exactly what my book is about. So it's a rather arrogant theory, isn't it? But don't take that from me. Let's read something written by one of the most famous Romantics, William Wordsworth, in his Preface to Lyrical Ballads. Taking up the subject, then, upon general grounds, let me ask, what is meant by the word poet? What is a poet? To whom does he address himself? And what language is to be expected from him? He is a man speaking to men, a man, it is true, endowed with more lively sensibility, more enthusiasm and tenderness, who has a greater knowledge of human nature, and a more comprehensive soul than are supposed to be common among mankind. A man pleased with his own passions and volitions, and who rejoices more than other men in the spirit of life that is in him, delighting to contemplate similar volitions and passions as manifested in the goings-on of the universe, and habitually compelled to create them where he does not find them. To these qualities he has added a disposition to be affected more than other men by absent things as if they were present, an ability of conjuring up in himself passions, which are indeed far from being the same as those produced by real events, yet, especially in those parts of the general sympathy which are pleasing and delightful, do more nearly resemble the passions produced by real events than anything which, from the motions of their own mind, merely other men are accustomed to feeling themselves, whence, and from practice, he has acquired a far greater readiness and power in expressing what he feels and thinks, and especially those thoughts and feelings which by his own choice, or from the structure of his own mind, arise in him without immediate external excitement. Anyway, now that was rather arrogant, wasn't it? According to him, the creative genius is more sympathetic and enthusiastic and tender. They care more about nature and knowledge, etc. This means that the poet, and by extension an artist, is different to ordinary people in both degree and in kind. In degree, because the artist has a higher degree of certain attributes, such as enthusiasm and tenderness, and in kind, because the artist has qualities that others do not possess at all. Basically, the artist is just like super awesome, and you're a bad person if you disagree. Also, you're not a creative genius like I am, because I can write poetry. Anyway, as you can imagine, there are some issues with this particular belief system. Let's just ask a few of them. Are artists demigods who create out of nothing? No. Artists are still regular people, and they are not superior to anyone else. The romantic ideal is a theory that was created by artists. And who do you think artists will consider to be the best people in the world? Artists. This is similar to how Plato declared that the rulers of kingdoms should be philosopher kings, which is rather arrogant, seeing as, Plato was a philosopher. Everyone always thinks their job is the most important, don't they? And the whole ex nihilo thing is also nonsense. All art is created by observation of existing art. If you decide to write a fantasy novel, then you're already not creating out of nothing, because the fantasy genre already exists. If you could somehow make up a genre that doesn't exist, then maybe you could argue that you have created ex nihilo. Although you would likely write that new genre book using a language that exists, so whoopsie doodle. Can we test the Romantics' ideas? Not really. How do we analyze something according to the supreme authority of the author? What if the author is dead? We can't know what the poem is about because that author's now dead, aren't they? And we also have plenty of examples of people using ideas from old pieces of art to comment on something new. For instance, Freud famously used the ancient Greek tale of Oedipus to explain his concept of the Oedipal complex, but that ancient tale has nothing to do with psychoanalysis. Freud just used it to explain his idea, which means that old stories can gain new interpretations. Another set of easy examples are all the modern retellings of Shakespearean plays. Surely Shakespeare never intended for Macbeth to be turned into a crime lord, did he? What about unintentional creativity? Now this is a tough one, isn't it? The Romantics claimed that all art had intention behind it, that it was created with the supreme power of the artist's imagination. But what if I just jotted some words down and it turned into a poem? Is it a poem? What if I start doodling, and before I know it, it becomes a beautiful image? Was that art? I didn't do it on purpose. Maybe I wasn't even conscious of doing it. But look, a pretty picture. There was no intention behind it, yet the action produced an aesthetic object. What about found objects? This is a rather, another annoying one. What if I just found an object somewhere and it was pretty, and so I displayed it? Does that turn it into art? There was no intention behind that. There wasn't even effort put into its creation. This is why works like Marcel Duchamp's Fountain cause such a ruckus. Is that urinal a piece of art or not? Does something have to be purposive for it to be classified as art? What about non-art aesthetic objects? There are things in this world that are not technically art, like traditional African masks, as they served a religious function, but now people display them as art. They were never intended as art, and yet they are. Or aren't they? The Romantics would likely have a difficult time answering that question. Or look at something like the work of Carol Boyes. Her work was practical art, ornate spoons and decorative plates and crafted ladles. Is it art? Are they just eating utensils? The Romantic may not know. As you can see, there are probably more criticisms of Romanticism than there are purported strengths. But the main strength really is that it has a strong focus on the creator. The creator of a piece of art is often neglected in literary analysis, but there certainly are things that can be learned from the author. Even if the author is generally not what we care about when it comes to art analysis, we generally care about the piece of art more than who created it. And that's Romanticism. A theory that doesn't hold up to scrutiny all that well, but at least it made a few interesting points about the role of the artist in artistic creation. And that's the end of the video. If you found it interesting, you can always obviously subscribe, like, comment, share, do the things. And yes, there will be a video next time about the next literary theory. And I hope that you have a fantastic day further. Ta-ta!